What is going on, everybody? We've got Nick and Armand from 30 Minutes to President's Club. Today we are doing a special mini playbook with our friends from Accord. We're talking about mutual action plans, sometimes known as MAPs. And we're going to be talking about a couple different things today. One, well, what is a MAP or mutual action plan if you've never used one today? Why is it important? Because anytime you introduce a new tool or idea to your sales process, it better actually move the needle. And I do believe that these do. Then we'll talk about how you make a map, how you introduce it to a customer, and then how you integrate it and weave it into the entire buying journey of your sales process. Let's start, however, with why it's important. When you put together a mutual action plan, which is essentially the key steps and stakeholders and deadlines and dates and resources needed to get buyer from, hey, I'm here today with a problem, to hey, things are really good, and your solution will help with that. You put all of that in a place that you and your buyer can look at in one place. When you do this, it does a couple things. One, it signals you actually know what you're doing, and your buyer wants to be able to trust you. And if you can signal that this is not your first rodeo, you actually build massive trust with them. The other interesting thing that a mutual action plan does is when you and your customer actually go through the mutual action plan, you're essentially agreeing to all of the key steps on what it takes to buy your thing. So things like access to power, a demo with a big group, meeting with the legal and compliance team that's super, super busy. When you put all of that in a mutual action plan and your buyer gives it the thumbs up, that is them implicitly agreeing, hey, we are going to do those things. So if you're struggling to do things like get to the CEO or the CXO to get the deal done, this can be a tool to help. One other thing that I really like about mutual action plans is that they facilitate really clear and open and honest communication between you and your customer. What you're doing is you're laying out, hey, here's the way that other folks have bought before. Let's have a conversation around how your process compares and contrasts. And when you do that, it gives the other person an opportunity to voice the concerns and questions that they have so that you can get answers for them as effectively as possible.
Alrighty, folks. So how do you actually make a mutual action plan? It's quite simple, but at the same time, it's going to depend for your business. So when you take the template that we've provided after this, make sure you tweak it for your business. So step number one is outline the major things you need to do in your sales cycle. In a classic mid-market sales cycle, that might be an initial champion discovery, a deep dive demo with your champion. Then you may bring that up to power to get them to sign off. And then from there, you probably go through a proposal process. Maybe there's a POC mixed in, and then you go through vendor review, which oftentimes includes legal and security. That's step number one. Step number two, once you have those big rocks, those big phases, layer in micro steps that you can assign dates and owners to. And it's important, folks, that especially for things like legal reviews, don't just put legal review as the step, because there are multiple mini steps involved. So my personal favorite mini step when it gets to those nitty-gritty vendor review processes is typically to put people on a red line deadline in legal. And what that means is the moment you get the MSA or the contract in their hands, you put them on a micro step deadline to get you first cuts of red lines back by the end of next week. So don't just say, oh, legal has to be done in 4 weeks, and then next thing you know, the first cuts aren't even back in 4 weeks. Put them on micro deadlines. Now, this is also describing how you would normally build a close plan, which is just an internal version of a mutual action plan. Nick, what is the difference between a close plan and a mutual action plan?
Well, it's the magic letter M, Armand. It is mutual. The whole idea behind a mutual action plan is it is built with your mutual success in mind. It's not just about getting the deal done. It's about getting the customer to the promised land, the dream state, the waved magic wand where they are attempting to get. And so when I build one of these out, I'm not just building it up into the point of, hey, the contract has been signed. I'm actually building it all the way through implementation when the customer is using your thing and seeing success with it.
And that is a perfect time for us to talk about when do you actually introduce a mutual action plan to a customer. The key thing here is way too many people introduce mutual action plans too late in the buying process. They oftentimes start MAPs when it's already a committed deal in vendor review. And sure, it can help you keep legal and security and procurement on track. That is oftentimes where a map is most helpful. But the key thing is if the deal went off the rails in the first place, it's not going to help you get there. So my personal favorite place to start a map is actually right after that first call when I have a champion bought in. So if I get a champion who is bought in and they're like, I want to buy your thing, but I know there are 3 or 4 more steps that I have to do before I even get to vendor review. That's a great way to be like, hey, champion. Typically what I find is there are a lot of steps to get a deal done. It oftentimes includes getting finance involved. There's security, there's legal. Would you be opposed to working on a success plan together here? And then I'll pull up the template and I'll be like, these are the typical steps we see customers go through. I'll fill this out with our names, but identified a couple people that I think need to be involved in the sales process. Could you give me a sense of, is this aligned with how you all would typically go about making a purchasing decision? And now they're collaborating it. So that's first contact with customer. That's when they first see the mutual action plan. And then what you do is you turn your back, you throw it in the trash, and you never look at it again. Is that right, Nick? Is that what we're talking about next?
No. That is not right, Armand. One thing I want to point out that you did really well when you were introducing it was you used the word typically a couple times. What you are not doing here is putting the customer in a box of, hey, this is a rigid plan that you must follow. You're saying, hey, this is most of the time, this is typically how folks will think about this. But I'm open to hearing from you. How are you thinking about it? This is not meant to be rigid. This is meant to open things up for the both of you. So what this means is you do not need to reach into the trash can and pull the crumpled up mutual action plan because both of you have been using this throughout the process. So what you need to do is actually weave the mutual action plan into the remainder of the sales process. And ideally, you pass that over to your implementation team, your customer success friends, to help finish the job out. Some best practices that I have for making sure that this thing actually gets used and makes an impact. 1, anytime that you meet with the customer, you should carve out some time towards the end of your meeting to reference that document, that mutual action plan again. One thing that I've done for particularly complex deals is actually had a standing meeting with my champion once a week for 30 minutes where we just go through the mutual action plan. What's the status of items? Are there any blockers to certain things? Are there any things that we need to add? This should be something that you revisit on an ongoing basis. The other thing that I think about is you want to make things as easy as possible for your customer. So you're going to be in scenarios where the customer emails you and they say, Nick, could you please send me a PDF of all of the reports that your product can put out for my team? And you'll reply to the customer and you'll say, no problem, I attached it to the email here. By the way, I also put this resource into our mutual action plan document. The idea here is you want to train your buyer that anytime they need to look at any resource that you've shared with them, they can go to the mutual action plan. Your job is to do the work for the buyer. Your job is to handle all of the organization. Make it as easy as possible for them to buy. And speaking of making it as easy as possible for folks to buy, Armand, can you make things easy for our audience here?
Absolutely. Well, guess what? We've provided with our wonderful friends at Accord a mutual action plan template that you can use. And guess what, folks? So long as you're not doing a 30-second close or a zippy one-call close, my guess is there's more than one step involved in your sales cycle. And so you can now start your own mutual action plans. Click in the link on this page right here, and you can use it 30 MPC and Accord style, and make sure you check it out with our wonderful friends Accord. And you should also check out their pretty sweet product on what it looks like to get a sick in-app in Accord mutual action plan too. Alrighty, folks, 30 MPC sponsored by Accord. We'll catch you guys later. Peace out.